Noi venim din viitor. Inteligență artificială, revoluție tehnologică, blockchain, realitate virtuală, bani digitali, Internet of Things. Vreți să țineți pasul cu noile tehnologii care ne schimbă viața? Stați cu noi la emisiunea Noi venim din viitor, prima emisiune de radio din România despre secretele viitorului. Cu Mirel Bran și invitații săi la RFI România, în fiecare vineri de la ora 5:30 la 6 și în reluare sâmbătă după știrile de la ora 11. O emisiune oferită de BRD, Grup Societe General și la French Tech.
Bine vă regăsim la o nouă ediție a emisiunii Noi venim din viitor, prima emisiune din România în care vorbim nu despre ce a fost și despre ce va fi. Sunt Mirel Bran și timp de o jumătate de oră vă propun să ne uităm la noi puțin pe dos, nu dinspre trecutul nostru, ci din viitorul nostru. Știți ce este un unicorn? O afacere care valorează mai mult de $1 miliard. Credeți că poți face atât de mulți bani din educație? Adică să înveți pe alții tot felul de lucruri pe online și să fii plătit pentru treaba asta? Da, se poate și așa. Astăzi am să vă povestesc despre un proiect din Africa de Sud. Se numește Go1 și este primul unicorn al Africii de Sud. A fost fondat în 2014 și este condus de Melvyn Lubega, în vârstă de 34 de ani. Melvyn a studiat business-ul la Universitatea din Cape Town și educația în relație cu tehnologia la Oxford. Pe lângă unicornul Go1 este și partener la firma de venture capital Brega, foarte activă în finanțarea startup-urilor din Africa. Succesul lui Melvyn se bazează și pe colaborarea cu organizația americană Endeavor, care asta face. Scalează startup-uri și face din ele unicorni. Endeavor este prezent și în România din 2021 și ați avut ocazia să-l auziți la această emisiune pe Mihnea Crăciun, care se ocupă de Endeavor România. Melvyn Lubega a fost invitat la București de către Endeavor România și am profitat de această ocazie pentru a-l invita la rândul meu la un interviu la emisiunea Noi venim din viitor. Este primul interviu cu miliardar pe care îl facem la această emisiune și mă bucur cu atât mai mult cu cât banii din această afacere sunt făcuți din educație. Această emisiune va fi în limba engleză. Melvyn, welcome to our radio show We Come from the Future. We invite to join us people coming from the future, and that is the place where we are coming from. I'm not joking. I think the people who deal with technology and education are seeing in the future as the mystics saw the light. What kind of light did you see that allowed you to create the first unicorn in South Africa?
No, thank you very much, Merle, and great to be on the show. I think when we thought about building out Go1, it was always about solving a problem bigger than ourselves. And so if I think about my background, so I originally grew up in Uganda, but I was born in South Africa, and I grew up in a very large family. And education was the most powerful tool we were able to use to change our economic circumstance. My parents studied very hard, which they remind me often that they worked very hard and studied very hard. And so for us, being able to build in technology or build in education with technology was very important. I mean, we paid lots of school fees on the journey building out Go1 today, but very proud of what we've built and the team we've assembled to date.
I myself had an African experience. I had the chance and the opportunity to travel to two countries, in Djibouti and in Togo.
Ah, nice.
So I don't really have a very big image about Africa, but I had the occasion to feel it a bit in these two countries. And I was very impressed. I was very impressed by the people there because they were so, how could I say, they wanted to evolve. They have this kind of desire of changing their lives and making their a better life. Here in Romania, you can find water anywhere, but there are countries in Africa, it's a big deal to find some water.
Exactly.
So here we are very privileged in Europe, but we don't really realize it. And when I went to Africa, I realized what privileged I was. How do you see this difference between these continents, Africa with this desire of evolving and Europe with all these privilege we have?
And it's interesting, so in the tech space, sometimes what is seen as a privilege can be a disadvantage. So for example, often to build a big business, you have to solve a big problem. And so where there are big challenges, there's a great opportunity to bring technology to actually solve those problems. But in the same vein, if you think about Africa, so we're very big in Africa around fintech, as an example, as are many places in the world, but in its emerging markets, we are more so. And you think of tools, let's say like M-Pesa, which because there was poor initial payment infrastructure, we actually leapfrogged a lot of legacy systems. So we actually, because we had no baggage or debt, we were able then to actually innovate faster and quicker than many of our developed European counterparts. And so I think often the opportunity and challenge of building in either resource-constrained setting or an emerging market is that you are, one, solving bigger problems, and also you have greater impact on how you solve those problems. But two, you also are forced to look for big markets outside of your own market. I think there's a book called Startup Nation where they tell the story of of Israel, and just how Israel, because of the market that they had, were almost forced to think about building global from day one. And so often you find African entrepreneurs think at that scale.
Noi venim din viitor, prima emisiune de radio din România despre secretele viitorului. Cu Mirel Bran și invitații săi la RFI România.
I had the occasion to interview the Israeli ambassador in Romania recently, and I was very impressed because there are almost 10 million people in Israel, and they succeeded to build about 100 unicorns. Oh my God. There are 65 million people in France, and they only have 27 unicorns.
Exactly.
Melvyn, I think my personal opinion is that in order to succeed in life, you need two things. First of all, to be hungry.
Yes.
Because if you are not hungry anymore, you don't evolve. Yeah. Second thing, to have a direction. I don't think the hungry is what is missing in Africa. Even in Romania, we are still hungry. Yeah. We are less hungry in the Western Europe, maybe. How do you see this relationship between this desire to evolve,
yes,
that I talked to you, and a direction in life and in business, because you need also direction?
Yes, of course. And I know Steve Jobs once said, stay hungry, stay foolish. And I think it's that point around, one, having the drive to want to do big, do better for yourself, to transform your society, but I think also doing so with direction. And I think direction almost brings a third element, which is the willingness to learn. So if you are unable to take advice from others or get steered, because no one has built many unicorns in our regions in Africa and Eastern Europe, but there are people that have around the world. And so how are you able to learn from others to let them guide you in the right direction? So you can say, I want to transform like our world, education, professional learning. But there are many companies that have done that before in the US, elsewhere. So how do we learn from their experience so we head in the right direction? Because we can spend our limited resources in the wrong direction. It's actually interesting when some part of a community called Endeavor, which you mentioned earlier, and through Endeavor, it was fascinating because I find you end up paying new school fees because someone's already come before you and you can learn from their experience. And so I think, one, it's about being hungry to having the direction, but also having a learning mentality where you can take advice from others to steer you in that right direction.
Yeah, that's great. You talked about Endeavor. You are invited in Romania by Endeavor Romania. What's your feeling about Romania? How do you feel this country?
I was actually just telling one of my Endeavor colleagues earlier. So it's my first time here. And there is a vibrancy about it. It could be the time of the year, it's summer, it's how to web, there's lots of excitement right now, but definitely feel like there's a lot happening. It almost feels a bit nascent, like it's something big is coming. And that's the thing I like about the region more broadly, and that's why I spend a lot of time here trying to understand what's taking place here. So definitely feeling that sense here, and I mean also hearing of some of the early startups coming through Series A, Series B levels, quite exciting. I think often the driver of success is the human capital. And I think there's very strong human capital in the region here. And that talent, with, to your point, right direction and the right funding, can do amazing stuff.
I know a startup, Romanian startup, Humans.ai, who created a robot which is counseling the Romanian government.
Wow.
And we have a Romanian chapter of the French organization La Fresh Tech in Romania. And we just organized an event recently about AI, and we invited on in the panel not only people from the tech area but also the robot who is counseling. And we had a chat with him on the stage, and it was amazing.
Yes.
And I feel like being in a country that it's we have this young generation creating all kind of startups, all kind of ideas, and this robot, it's a worldwide premiere. It's something amazing. How do you feel when you are in touch with young people in Africa? Because I'm in touch with a lot of young people creating startups in Romania. But how does it happen in the countries you are in?
So first of all, listeners, I'd like to confirm that I'm not a robot, and this is really Melvyn Lubega speaking. But definitely similar experience, I think, in Africa, where, one thing, we're very populous and have a very young population in Africa. And what we find is that young people aren't, I would say, biased or engendered by previous ways of doing things. And so when you speak about a panel with a robot, someone will be like, but how? But in the same vein, you can get the exact same output, same content, and actually have that engagement through the LLMs that are taking place right now. And so I find in Africa, it's a very exciting space. So right now I'm fairly active in venture capital, and I speak to many young entrepreneurs building around the continent. And what's so true and resonates with me is everyone is laser focused on solving a problem. And I think because they dedicate themselves to solving a particular problem, they're able to go very deep on why am I building this, as opposed to saying I'm building the Netflix for X or the Uber for Y. It's actually almost starting with the problem as opposed to the solution. And I think that's something which I often find in many of the young people in Africa that I engage when I'm looking at investing.
Noi venim din viitor, prima emisiune de radio din România despre secretele viitorului. Cu Mirel Bran și invitații săi la RFI România.
In the last years, we saw in Romania kind of a new renaissance, because Romania is a complicated country. We had a past communist regime, a dictatorship, and so on. And we spent almost 30 years in order to try to be reborn from our own ashes. And now when I'm looking at this young generation, I'm very excited by their future, because my generation didn't have the tools they have. The new technologies offer to these young people tools I could never imagine, even 5 or 10 years ago.
Yes.
How do you see a country like Romania and a continent like Africa in the context of these new technologies, which are a huge opportunity?
No, incredible opportunity. I was speaking at a conference last week called COGX. It's the world's biggest AI conference. And so also speaking there was Reid Hoffman, who was the co-founder of LinkedIn and actually an Endeavor board member. And he made the point that AI is probably one of the top 3 best tools or top tools created to help scale human potential. After them, he put the internet and mobile phones. So between AI and mobile phones and internet, there's lots of pressure to deliver. But what I quite like is the element of scaling human potential. So you have potential as human beings, but how do you scale it? And I think that tools like the technology ones that you've mentioned enable us today as young people, as entrepreneurs, and even as youth looking for jobs to almost compete at a different level. So for example, historically, let's say you needed to have 10 years experience for a particular job. Now, if you know how to access the information and to use those tools, you can actually perform the same task as someone with 10 years experience. And so what you're seeing technology is actually lowering the barriers and improving access to jobs, to companies, to opportunities.
I'm amazed and very excited to have you here, because you succeeded to build the first unicorn in South Africa based on education and training online. So I'm really amazed.
Thank you.
Can you tell us the story of Go One, the company you created and transformed in a unicorn in South Africa?
Yes. And so Go One, we ultimately exist to help people unlock their positive potential through a love for learning. And so the platform itself, you can think of it like a Spotify for professional learning. So we bring together over 100,000 courses, resources into one ecosystem, one subscription. And then we offer that to organizations, governments, individuals around the world in over 60 countries. And so ultimately the pain point for us came down to what I started off with is, as founders, our experience was the transformative power of education in our lives and our families has been incredible. But the access to that is difficult. So if you're an organization and you want your company or your staff to have the best skills or the best trainer, if you want the best in management, you may go to Harvard. You want the best in health, you may go somewhere else. And so the best in Excel, you might go to Microsoft. And so for you to have the best of everything, you have to have multiple training providers. And so our insight was, why not bring the best under one subscription so every company can get the best? And because of our scale, we're able to now get better pricing than typical people do. And so really for us, it is about that thinking. And so it's a journey which we began now in 2015 with my co-founders and I. My background was more in actuarial science, education, and statistics. Whereas my other co-founders, it's interesting, you've got an economist, you've got a lawyer, you've got a doctor, and you've got a software engineer and an actuary. And it sounds like a start of a joke, but all of us brought different experiences to the table. And obviously the journey for us has been a overnight 8-year success. But as we've built out the business, it's been very clear to us that what helped us succeed was never losing sight of, one, what the goal is, to your point around direction, like what problem are we solving? Because it's very easy to fall in love with, I want to build a learning management system. But actually, what helps a company grow their stuff? It's the content with the platform and everything coming together. But also, most importantly, it was through collaboration. Even as co-founders, you choose, do you want to bring on more co-founders, less? Do I want to build this on my own? But even as you've built the business, we've gotten to the scale we've gotten to because of our distribution and channel partners, because of our content partners. We don't create any content ourselves. And so just that point of realizing that by co-creating, you can have a bigger impact has allowed us to scale beyond where we are. And look, I still believe we're a startup. It's still day one for us. We're very proud that, every 1.2 seconds, someone completes a course on our platform around the world. But for us, it's only the beginning because, to your point, education is such a big field out there.
You also partner in investment funds in Brega. Yeah. Romania and the continent Africa has a problem with the capital because we have a lot of people, interesting people, able to do a lot of things in this country and on your continent. But what we lack is capital. We need capital. For Romania, it's much more easier because we are part of the European Union and we receive a lot of funds from the European Union in order to develop our country and so on. So Romania has already solved this problem. Yeah. But how does it happen in Africa? Because you have a lot of interesting people, young people, able to create very interesting startups like you did, but they need capital.
Yeah, it's so true. And when we began our business, I struggled to raise our first round of funding. And we thought we went to school, we studied hard, we did everything our parents told us to do, but we still struggled to raise that first amount of capital. And so for me, as an investor, I say I want to be the investor I wish I had when I was building my businesses, not only because there are very few investors who are founders who've built businesses and get what it takes to build, but also to your point, is we are able to unlock international capital in Africa. And so it is challenging. And that's why we're very intentional when I invest to not only focus on the big countries like South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, but also then make investments elsewhere in the region to make sure that we are able to, your point, unlock that value, because there are many entrepreneurs building strong businesses, solving big problems, but because they didn't go to an Ivy League school or went to Sciences Po or whatever, they don't have that exposure of knowing those networks. And so it is something I put a task on the team to try and achieve, but it's not easy. And it's unfortunate because what you find in Africa as well is often people are supporting many family members. And so through that, entrepreneurship can be very risky. So how do you say, leave your corporate job and go take risk that may not work out? And I think it's about also then supporting those that do take those risks. I think what I find in the US is that, or even Western world, is that entrepreneurship and failure is a bit more embraced, whereas in Africa, sometimes it's almost like failure is fatal. And so being able to change that mindset is not only a capital problem, but more so a stigma perspective as well.
Noi venim din viitor, prima emisiune de radio din România despre secretele viitorului. Cu Mirel Bran și invitații săi la RFI România.
So the way you invest it's not just about money, it's also about the relationship with these people. How does it happen?
No, exactly. For me, it's about one, impact, and I think impact's had both at a startup level with individual entrepreneurs and sharing knowledge and sharing school fees with them, but also the kind of problems that excite us. So I believe that the best investors are those that understand the problem, but they also understand what it takes to solve that problem from experience in other spaces. And so for us, And I'm very proud, in Briga. So Briga, we manage about 600 million euros across Europe and Africa. And so different partners have different expertise. And so being able to leverage expertise of, let's say, a partner that's built something in France and almost a similar thing in Africa, you're able to then, again, pay those new school fees. And so we benchmark, our impact, not only in the problems that we solve with our entrepreneurs, but also how we go about solving them.
I would be curious to see also who you are, because we learned what you are doing, but who are you? What's the alchemy behind the character we have in front of the microphone?
Yeah, so, my mother says I'm the last born so far. I don't know what that means, but I have 2 older siblings, and so grew up in a very tight family. I mentioned earlier my parents are Ugandan by origin, but I grew up and we live in South Africa today. But came from a sense of where my mother has 35 siblings, and so my granddad was a amorous man. But one thing my grandfather valued was education, and so always made sure all his kids went to school. And I think that really imbued the value of education, not only in my mother and my father, but also in me. I'm having the opportunity to, because look, I've got many family members who still live in the village, in the rural areas in Uganda. But because of the focus on education, we've been able to get to where we are as a family. And so for me, education is a big thing on my life. That being said, I am a Boy Scout and I do like the outdoors. And so when I was coming through here, I saw how nice and bright it was outside. And so looking forward for going for a walk later. But for me, it's really been a function of, one, how do I leverage my experience to education to have an impact? And so for me, what keeps me honest is I want to solve problems whose ideas are so exciting they keep me up at night. So imagine thinking about an idea and you're like at night thinking, staring at the roof, what should I build next? But also in the same vein, I want to partner and invest in businesses that I wish I started because of the problem they're solving or the quality of the team. And so that's what keeps me honest. But ultimately, both personally and professionally, my goal is to create 100,000 jobs over my lifetime. And so luckily, we've got lots of problems to solve in Africa, but it starts from a deep sense of knowing where home is. And so whilst I travel a lot and I've worked in over 40 countries around the world, for me, I see Africa as being the home where I can actually have the most meaningful impact. And so that's what drives me both personally and professionally.
In fact, it's a chance being born on that continent. Because, I know very rich people, and some of them, they struggle to earn the first million. And when they get to the first million, they wanted to have 2 millions, and then 5 millions, and then 10 millions, and then 20 millions, and so on. And they are not very happy. While people like you reached $1 billion. I mean, how can you how can you resist to this pressure? Because the money is also kind of a pressure on each of us. Yeah. But I think that the fact that you live in these countries and you saw also the poor side of life, because there are a lot of very poor areas in Africa. I think this is changing the game.
Yeah, agreed.
How do you feel this the relationship between someone who saw the poor side of life, yeah, and then get to $1 billion without losing his mind?
I don't know about not losing my mind, but I'm glad I'm showing up sane today. But definitely what I do find is I think it's an appreciation of what is possible. And so it goes 2 ways. So when I grew up, there weren't many mentors or people who you could look up to who had built tech businesses. And so for me, even as we grow in skill, it's important to share our story because the person who was me 10 years ago should know it's possible to get here. But I think that almost dichotomy and experience, almost one keeps you very laser focused because, if you can get somewhere in 10 years, you can also go backwards in as fast a time. But I think it also then raises the point around having that deep understanding of the context from where you come. And I think that's where the problem solving element I mentioned earlier is quite important. But even for myself, look, I have relative privilege. I mean, I studied undergrad. I got scholarships in high school. I got scholarships in university. And I did get a chance to study abroad at Oxford for my master's. So already I'm privileged from those that weren't necessarily privileged. But sometimes I always ask my friends who I went to university with is, are we too privileged to be successful? And I mention that point because when you have outside opportunities. So, if push comes to shove, I can go work at that company, or I can go to my parents' business, or whatever it may be. You will not show up at your work like you have to make it work, like you put everything on the line. You almost will be a bit like reluctant. It's like when someone has a side hustle and they work in a corporate job, it's like, no, that's my, my 5 to 9 and I work on that on the side. As opposed to someone who doesn't have the job who's like, I am doing this every single day. And I think that's where in tech and with startups, entrepreneurs that are focusing on their problems are able to have an outsized impact because they just laser focused on that problem. And I think that dichotomy has given me that exposure of deeply understanding the problem and exposure to the tools to help me address that problem, but still trying to remain sane.
Noi venim din viitor, prima emisiune de radio din România despre secretele viitorului. Cu Mirel Bran și invitații săi la RFI România.
We are living in a world where the technologies are evolving so fast that even our ability to understand what's happening, it's overwhelmed. I mean, I read a lot. I kept myself informed every day, but I still have this feeling of being in the middle of a tsunami coming. How do you see the future of the African continent in the context of the new technologies?
So one of my favorite movies is Black Panther. And there's an area called Wakanda, which is like this place of like innovation around the world, secretive, where they make this thing called vibranium. And I think that's where the potential of what Africa can be if it engages with the global discourse around technology and innovation. I think the big thing about tools like even AI, ultimately there's data and models that train them. And if you aren't part of that process of training these models, contributing to these data sets, you will be left behind where you won't be able to get the most value from these tools. And so I think the future of Africa is one where if we're able to engage in the global conversations around these technologies, we're able to then contribute and therefore ensure that we shape how they're being used, but also how they're being built. And so I think with Africa, because we have such a demographic, call it dividend at this point in time, we have a very young population, education levels are improving over time. Obviously we've got lots of natural resources and arable land, but I think that gives us a unique stepping stone, but will require us to engage globally and not necessarily be so insular in our thinking. And so I think if we're able to unlock that thinking, we should go very far.
I have one last small question. If you had a robot who was able to do every works in the world you need, and you would have all the time for yourself, what would you do?
I would probably do what I'm doing now, and that means spending time with entrepreneurs. Like, as it is, when you're building a business or running a company, you're so laser focused on your business, your problem. I serve on some listed board companies, some big company boards. And whether you run a startup or a big company board CEO that's listed, everyone's dealing with issues and problems. And what I really get excitement by is working with and problem solving with entrepreneurs that are passionate about what they build, because they almost enthuse you. You get excited with them discussing the issue, the problem. And so that's something which I spend lots of time with and very grateful for, even the Endeavor community, because there are many of us like that. But if I had to have a robot that was doing my interviews and making me coffee, I would probably, spend time just talking to entrepreneurs in spaces different to my own and helping them think through what problems we can solve together.
Melvyn, îți mulțumesc că ai fost cu noi la RFI România. Dragi ascultători, l-ați auzit la emisiunea Noi venim din viitor pe Melvyn Lubega, fondatorul primului unicorn din Africa de Sud și partener la firma de venture capital Brega, foarte activă în finanțarea startup-urilor din Africa. Un om extraordinar care a făcut mai mult de $1 miliard dintr-o afacere bazată pe educație și formare online. Mai multe despre el și proiectele lui puteți afla la adresele go1.com, go1.com și brega.com, breega.com. Iar dacă vreți să auziți ceva nou și să respirați un aer mai oxigenat așa ca la munte, ascultați această emisiune. Noi venim din viitor. Pentru că viitorul pe care îl imaginezi mâine este aerul pe care îl respirați. Această emisiune este acum accesibilă și în podcast și pe canalul de YouTube Eu vin din viitor, Mirel Bran. Dați un click, abonați-vă și aflați din ce se fă cu viitorul ca să înțelegeți ce căutați în acest prezent. În ce privește viitorul, treaba asta așa. Ori ne omorâm unii pe alții într-un război nimicitor, ori construim împreună ceva atât atât de frumos încât poate bate orice ficțiune. Treaba asta o hotărâm împreună, dacă viitorul va fi o poveste sau ruina unui vis. Sunt Melvyn Lubega și vă aștept vinerea viitoare de la 5:30 la 6 și în reluare sâmbătă după știrile de la ora 11. Să auzim de bine și stați liniștiți, noi venim din viitor și totul e ok.
Noi venim din viitor, prima emisiune de radio din România despre secretele viitorului. Cu Melvyn Lubega și invitații săi la RFI România. O emisiune oferită de BRD, Grup Societe General și la French Tech.